The heat in Lagos didn't just cling to the skin, it boiled frustrations to the surface. Emily Parker wiped the sweat from her brow and glared at the shining black Range Rover parked arrogantly across two spaces at the Lekki Mall. Like it owned the world. Like he owned the world. It wasn't just a car. It was a rolling monument to everything wrong in her life. Her fingers tightened around the key in her hand. For 6 months, she'd fought the urge. 6 months since Carter Global Developments, the company run by the cold, untouchable Ethan Carter, had pulled her scholarship funding because of some vague, budget realignment. 6 months since she dropped out of the University of Lagos with a mountain of debt and a degree that might never be finished. And now, the man himself, or at least his symbol, sat before her, mocking her with its gleaming, perfect paint job. Maybe justice needs a little push, Emily muttered. She crouched low and, with one swift, shaking motion, dragged her key along the Range Rover's side. Metal screeched softly. The scratch carved a brutal scar across the door, deep and defiant. But she wasn't finished. Digging into her purse, she found her favorite red lipstick, the one shade she only used on days she wanted to feel powerful. In bold, sloppy letters across the black paint, she scrawled. Her heart pounded, part exhilaration, part terror. This was reckless. Stupid. Maybe even criminal. But it felt right. Bold move, a voice said smoothly behind her. Emily froze. The air shifted. She slowly turned to find a man standing near the rear of the SUV. Tall. Crisp white shirt. Dark tailored pants. No tie, but every line of his posture screamed control. Authority. Danger. His eyes, cold and gray like the Atlantic before a storm, narrowed as they took in the damage. You're Ethan Carter, Emily breathed, horrified. He didn't smile. Didn't blink. And you, he said, voice like sharp glass, just vandalized my car. Her throat tightened. Save it. I could call the police. He glanced down at the key still clutched in her fist. Or you can explain why you think this was a smart idea. Emily's mind raced. Escape. Beg. Lie. Before she could answer, he moved faster than she expected, gripping her wrist. Not hard, but with purpose. Let go, she snapped. You destroyed my property. That's not something you just walk away from. His SUV door was still open from when he'd spotted her. On the passenger seat, something shiny caught Emily's desperate gaze. Handcuffs. Silver. Sleek. An absurd, reckless idea formed in her head. Before she could second-guess herself, she lunged, grabbed the cuffs, and snapped one end around his wrist, and the other around hers. His eyes widened for the first time, breaking that glacial calm. What the hell are you doing? Stopping you from dragging me to the police, Emily blurted. If I'm stuck to you, you'll have to listen. Ethan stared at her like she'd sprouted horns. These are real cuffs. There's no key here. Perfect, Emily said, chin lifting defiantly. Now you have no choice but to hear me out. A muscle jumped in his jaw. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Emily's pulse thundered, but she refused to back down. No. That was trusting Carter Global. Scene change, the clock ticks. Mr. Carter. A voice crackled through the SUV's Bluetooth. Your 10 o'clock with the Lagos Waterfront Consortium is waiting. They'll only hold the room for 15 more minutes. Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose, cold fury giving way to calculation. You, he told Emily, are coming with me. She gaped. What? You wanted my attention. Congratulations. Now you'll really be in the spotlight. He grabbed his laptop bag with his free hand. With the other, he tugged her toward the SUV. Emily stumbled alongside him. Wait. No. I can't. Too late. As they slid into the car and sped toward Eco-Atlantic's towering skyline, Emily realized her plan hadn't just backfired. It had detonated. The silence inside the Range Rover was as thick as the Lego's humidity. Emily clenched her hands in her lap, heart hammering. She had planned to make a statement. She had not planned to be handcuffed to a billionaire real estate tycoon driving through the city with the precision of a man who probably crushed rivals before breakfast. Ethan Carter didn't look at her as he maneuvered through traffic. His profile was all sharp lines, jaw tense, lips pressed into a thin line. A man used to control. Power. She could almost feel the fury radiating off him. Just drop me off somewhere, she said, voice brittle. This has gone too far. Ethan gave a sharp, humorless laugh. Too far. You keyed my car. You vandalized property. You handcuffed yourself to me like some deranged activist. And now, you want to call timeout? Emily's breath caught. She stared out the window at the Lego skyline zipping by, glass towers glinting in the noon sun, a patchwork of ambition and chaos. I didn't mean for this to spiral. I just wanted, she bit her lip. I wanted you to understand. Understand what? He snapped, eyes fixed on the road. That you're reckless? That you think destroying someone's property is how adults solve problems? Emily sat up straighter. Your company destroyed my life. You cut my scholarship. I lost everything because of Carter Global. Ethan finally glanced at her, gray eyes flashing. I didn't cut your scholarship. Your name's on the building. That makes you responsible. She crossed her arms, ignoring the awkward pull of the handcuffs. Besides, trying to reason with Carter Global was useless. You ignore emails. Calls. Complaints. What choice did I have? For a moment, something flickered across Ethan's face, something almost human. Then it vanished. You made a very poor one. They pulled into the towering gates of Eco-Atlantic Business Complex. A sleek security checkpoint waved them through, the guards hardly daring to glance into the SUV. Where are you taking me? Emily demanded. My 10 o'clock meeting. Ethan's voice was like stone. You've attached yourself to my day. Congratulations, you're about to see what real problems look like. Inside the lobby, Ethan strode toward the elevators, dragging Emily beside him. Stop. I can't. She planted her feet. He turned, impatient. What now? I can't take elevators, she said, voice small but firm. Claustrophobia. Ethan stared at her like she'd claimed she was allergic to air. You cannot be serious. I am. Her chin lifted. We'll have to take the stairs. A tense pause. For a moment, she thought he might actually explode. But instead, Ethan closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and muttered, unbelievable. By the time they reached the 20th floor, both were breathing heavily. Sweat clung to Emily's neck. Ethan had shed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his pristine white shirt. She glanced sideways at him. Even furious, he looked, maddeningly put together. Ethan pushed open the door to Conference Room C, where a group of sharp-suited men and women were seated around a polished table. The room fell into stunned silence. All eyes locked onto the silver handcuffs. A portly man at the head of the table, Chief Adebayo, head of the Lagos Waterfront Consortium, raised an eyebrow. Mr. Carter, is this some new negotiation tactic? Ethan didn't blink. This is Emily Parker. My fiancée. Emily's breath caught. Fiancée? Chief Adebayo repeated, amused. Ethan gave her a subtle squeeze through the cuffs, a warning to play along. Yes. We had an eventful morning. Private matters. Adebayo chuckled. Ah. Young love. Say no more. The other executives smiled politely. Some looked skeptical. Others intrigued. Emily forced a smile, channeling every ounce of bravado she used to carry at university debates. It's never boring with Ethan. The meeting began. Ethan's team presented their proposal to secure valuable land near Victoria Island for a mixed-use development. Chief Adebayo listened, nodding occasionally. Emily watched Ethan transform. The cold, angry man beside her became a smooth, commanding leader. Facts. Figures. Vision. But when Adebayo raised concerns, it wasn't Ethan who smoothed things over. It was Emily. The community impact projections seem ambitious, Adebayo said. Emily leaned forward. That's because they are. But Ethan's always believed in thinking long-term. I know, he talks about it constantly. She smiled as if sharing a private joke. His passion is transforming Lagos into a city that works for everyone, not just the wealthy. Ethan blinked. Just once. The room warmed. Adebayo's wife, seated beside him, smiled approvingly. By the end of the meeting, the consortium agreed to prelim terms. The aftermath. In the corridor, Ethan turned to Emily. His face was unreadable. That was reckless. Insane. His gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. And effective. Emily shrugged, heart racing. You're welcome. I'm not thanking you. This, he held up their cuffed wrists, is still a disaster. A security guard approached. Sir, a locksmith is waiting downstairs. Ethan nodded. As they rode the elevator down, Emily clung to the rail and focused on her breathing. Ethan said, once these come off, you're paying for the damages to my vehicle. And then you're staying out of my life. Emily nodded stiffly. Fine by me. But deep down, something told her neither of them would be able to walk away that easily. The locksmith was not at all impressed with their situation. Ethan and Emily stood at the entrance of the high-rise building, the silver handcuffs still linking them together. The air between them crackled with tension, but the new annoyance was the arrival of a security guard and a locksmith who eyed them like they were a strange circus act. You two need to stop, the locksmith said, shaking his head as he examined the cuffs. I don't unlock cuffs. Only door locks. He crossed his arms. Sorry, but I'm a law-abiding citizen. Ethan's jaw tightened as he stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. This is not some game, he started, but the locksmith raised his hands in surrender. I'm not doing it, he said flatly. You two better figure it out. This is beyond me. Emily let out a frustrated breath, her eyes scanning the bustling street outside. This was just becoming more ridiculous by the minute. She never imagined the day would start with vandalizing a billionaire's car and end with her handcuffed to him in public. Great. You're the one with the fancy car. You fix it, she muttered. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time since the incident, there was a flicker of something almost like amusement in his eyes. Fine, but I'm not doing this alone. You're with me. Yeah, for the next God knows how many hours, she shot back, annoyed. Minutes later, they were inside the elevator again, heading to the 50th floor, where the land deal negotiations were about to begin. Ethan had kept his composure, but it was clear the earlier frustration hadn't left him. Emily, on the other hand, felt the weight of the handcuffs gnawing at her nerves. It felt like everything she did today was making the situation worse. Still, she wasn't about to back down. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into the conference room. A group of sharply dressed Nigerian businesspeople sat at a long glass table, their eyes immediately locking onto the handcuffed duo. The tall Nigerian man at the head of the table raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead, he gave a polite nod. Mr. Carter, the man began, are we to assume that, your fiancé has a particular flair for personal security measures? Ethan Shot Emily an irritated glance. Not exactly. He didn't offer further explanation. Emily cleared her throat, deciding to save face for both of them. You know how it is, she said, flashing her most charming smile. Some engagements are just unconventional. The room's tension eased for a moment, but only briefly. The seriousness of the meeting soon took over. Ethan presented the proposal with practiced ease, detailing Carter Global's plans for a luxurious resort near the water's edge of Lagos. But Emily, despite the handcuffs, became an unexpected star in the room. With every question, she added sharp insights, her background in urban planning, a forgotten part of her old dreams, showing through. She watched as the clients, some of the most powerful men in Lagos, began to warm to her. Emily could see Ethan's pride in her from the corner of her eye, though he kept his expression stoic. It was clear that his sharp business mind saw an asset in her. The deal was a success. Preliminary terms were signed, and Emily had earned her first real victory in the Carter world. Later, as they walked through the sleek corridor of the building, Emily couldn't help but feel a slight rush from the meeting. She had played a role in securing a huge deal, a deal that she would have never dreamed of a week ago. Yet here she was, handcuffed to a man she barely knew, and somehow that felt more surreal than anything else. That went well, she said, glancing at Ethan. Don't get used to it, he responded, though there was a hint of something softer in his voice. You don't belong here, Emily. His words stung. But she pushed them aside. She wasn't about to let this man define her. I don't belong where, she retorted. In a room full of people who think their money gives them a right to make decisions for others. I do belong here. You were right, Ethan. This city needs people who understand it, who can make a difference, not just build luxury resorts for the rich. The silence stretched between them as they walked to the exit. For a moment, Ethan didn't respond. They reached the parking lot, and Emily felt an uneasy quiet settle over her. I don't trust you, you know, Ethan said abruptly, looking at her for the first time in hours. His voice was low but intense. You're playing a dangerous game, Emily. Do you really think I'm going to just give you everything you want? Emily stepped back, unafraid. I don't want everything, she said. I want my future. I want to finish my education. I want to have control of my life, something you and your company took from me. Ethan didn't answer at first, his expression unreadable. They were standing too close, and the handcuffs between them felt heavier than before. Fine, he said at last, his voice colder again. I'll help you. But there's a catch. Emily narrowed her eyes. What catch? You're going to continue to pretend. You're going to be my fiancé, for real this time, Ethan said firmly. If you want to play this game, you'll play by my rules. Emily felt a sharp pang of frustration. She was already tangled in this web of lies, but she couldn't stop herself from responding. Deal, she said, locking eyes with him. But don't think I'll be some pawn in your game. Ethan gave her a slight nod, his jaw tightening again. Good, he said. Because for the next 2 months, this charade is going to be more real than you ever imagined. Emily Parker sat in front of a vanity mirror in her modest apartment, running her fingers through her hair, trying to calm the nerves. For the past few days, the charade had been nothing more than a series of awkward interactions and forced smiles in front of important business people. But today, things were different. Today, they were going public. The press had caught wind of her and Ethan's engagement, and rumors swirled about the unlikely couple. Who was the mysterious woman? How did she manage to snare the infamous Ethan Carter? Questions that Emily wasn't prepared for, and definitely didn't want to answer. But there was no turning back now. Ethan had made it clear that this was the only way to get what she wanted. And, if she was being honest with herself, maybe she wanted more than just the scholarship. Maybe there was something about this billionaire that intrigued her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something was shifting. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she glanced down at the text message from Ethan. "Meet me at the gala tonight. It's official." Legos glittered under the night sky as Emily stepped into the lavish ballroom of one of the city's most exclusive hotels. The gala was an annual event attended by Nigeria's elite, the businessmen, politicians, and celebrities that ran the country behind the scenes. Emily had never felt so out of place. She wore a custom-made dress, designed to make her blend in with the wealthy crowd, but the butterflies in her stomach refused to settle. This wasn't just any event, it was her debut as Ethan Carter's fiancée, and everyone here would be watching her every move. As she stepped out of the limo, she caught sight of Ethan across the room. He stood like a monument of perfection, tall, composed, and radiating power. His expression was serious, as it always was, but there was something else in his gaze when he saw her. For a moment, their eyes locked, and she could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on them both. "You look breathtaking," Ethan said, stepping toward her. Emily's lips parted in surprise. Ethan, the man who never gave compliments, just called her breathtaking. The words felt strange coming from him, but they also felt oddly sincere. "Thanks," she said softly, trying to hide her growing unease. "Let's get this over with," Ethan murmured, offering his arm. "We have a lot to prove tonight." They walked into the ballroom together, every eye in the room immediately turning to them. Cameras flashed, and whispers spread like wildfire. Emily could feel the pressure building, but she kept her chin high and smiled, playing the role she had to. The confrontation. It didn't take long for Samantha Blake to find them. The moment she approached, the air in the room shifted. "Ethan," Samantha's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "I see you finally found someone worthy of your attention." Emily stiffened, instinctively stepping closer to Ethan, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, his jaw tightened. "Samantha," he said coolly, not bothering to mask his disdain. "This is Emily, my fiancée. And if you'll excuse us, we have a few things to take care of." Samantha's eyes flicked to Emily, then back to Ethan. "I can't believe you've actually gone through with it. You've never been the type to commit to anything, let alone her." Emily bristled at the implication. "You don't know me," she shot back, her voice firm. "And if you think I'm just some woman in a suit, then you're sadly mistaken." Samantha's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "I'm just surprised you would settle for her, Ethan. But then again, maybe you've finally realized that the woman of your dreams is out of your reach." Ethan's eyes flashed with annoyance. "You should leave, Samantha. It's clear you've got nothing new to offer." Emily caught her breath, not sure if she should intervene or step back. But before she could say anything more, Ethan grabbed her hand and led her away, leaving Samantha standing there, seething. Behind closed doors. The night dragged on, with the two of them facing relentless questions from the press, questions Emily had no answers for. As the gala wound down, Ethan led her to a quieter corner, away from the crowds. Emily sighed, rubbing her temple. "This isn't what I signed up for, Ethan. This is too much. The media, the stares, the constant pressure to be something I'm not. It's all too much." Ethan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You knew what you were getting into when you agreed to this, Emily. Don't act like you didn't." She looked up at him, eyes narrowing. "I didn't sign up for this circus. I agreed to pretend to be your fiancé for 2 months to get my life back. But I didn't sign up for this constant act." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled with the unspoken words they were both too afraid to say. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "You're right. This isn't fair to you. But it's the only way I can fix things. I've made too many mistakes. I can't undo them, but I can try to make things right, with you." Emily's heart fluttered at his words, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "And what about us, Ethan? Where does that leave us?" Is this just business to you? Because I'm starting to wonder. Ethan's gaze softened, and for the first time that night, he seemed vulnerable. It's not just business. But it's complicated, Emily. And right now, it's easier to focus on the business part. Emily didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to run, to escape this whole situation. But another part of her, the part that was still angry, still determined, wanted to fight. Maybe this charade was just the beginning. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of attention. The media buzzed incessantly, publishing stories about Ethan Carter's new fiancée. The headlines were a mix of admiration, skepticism, and outright gossip. Who is Emily Parker? The woman who tamed Lagos's most elusive billionaire. Is this true love, or a power play? The more Emily read, the more she felt herself suffocating in the weight of the expectations placed on her. She had agreed to play the role, but this was becoming something far more intense than she ever imagined. It was late in the evening, and Emily was once again staring at herself in the mirror, adjusting the elegant dress she wore for yet another event. The air was thick with tension. She was about to accompany Ethan to another gala, but this time, the stakes felt higher. Their engagement was no longer just for appearances, people were starting to expect them to perform as a couple. There had been moments. Moments where she could have sworn that Ethan wasn't just pretending. Moments where his eyes lingered a bit too long. Where his touches were just a bit more intimate than necessary. But those moments were fleeting, and soon enough, the cold CEO would return to the surface. Is this what you really want, Emily? She whispered to her reflection. She had always been a woman of purpose, strong, determined, and ambitious. This situation didn't feel like a step toward her future, but more like a gilded cage. Ethan was waiting for her in the living room when she stepped into the penthouse suite. He was dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, a look that always commanded attention. His jaw was set in that familiar, serious line. Ready? He asked, his voice businesslike. Emily nodded, feeling the sudden pressure of the evening's expectations bearing down on her. As they arrived at the hotel, cameras flashed. The paparazzi was everywhere, shouting their questions, their voices drowned by the blinding lights. Is it true? Are you and Mr. Carter really in love? One reporter asked as they made their way to the red carpet. Do you have any plans for a wedding soon? Another chimed in. Emily kept her face neutral, her hand instinctively reaching for Ethan's arm. This was all part of the game, but the closer they got to the truth, the harder it became to distinguish where the act ended and reality began. The night was a blur of interviews, photographs, and forced smiles. But Emily couldn't ignore the way Ethan's hand would occasionally brush hers, or the way he would protectively step closer to her when the press crowd became too much. Later that night, after the press had been cleared out and the event had come to a close, Emily found herself in a quiet moment with Ethan. They were both standing on the balcony of the hotel suite, overlooking the glowing lights of Lagos. Emily turned to him, her voice soft but steady. You know, this isn't easy for me. Ethan didn't look at her right away. He was staring out at the city, the weight of the day still heavy on his shoulders. It isn't easy for either of us. But it's the deal we made. Emily stepped closer to him, the cool night air brushing against her skin. But what if I'm not just playing a part anymore? What if I'm starting to feel like this could be real? His silence was deafening. Finally, he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. You're confused. This is just business, Emily. You can't let your emotions get involved. Her heart stuttered at his words. He said it like it was a warning, like she was about to make a mistake. But his gaze softened ever so slightly when he looked at her, and Emily could feel the pull of something deeper beneath the surface. She took a step back, shaking her head. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm doing. I just thought that, maybe, this was more than just a deal. Ethan's jaw clenched as he stepped closer, his voice dropping low. I told you, Emily. This is just a deal. Don't get caught up in the fantasy. But even as he said the words, Emily could see the conflict in his eyes. It was a crack in the armor he so carefully built around himself. Before she could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. We'll talk about this later, he said curtly. Right now, I have to handle something. As Ethan walked away, Emily felt a pang of disappointment. She had seen something, a glimpse of a man who might actually care, but now it felt like a distant memory. She was left standing in the cold, her thoughts spiraling. She had to figure out what was going on with Ethan. There was more to him than the cold businessman everyone saw. She could feel it. But what was he hiding? The following week felt like a blur. Emily had been keeping herself busy, working on her side projects, meeting with the media, and maintaining her public persona as Ethan's fiancée. But deep down, the cracks in their arrangement were starting to show. The more she was around Ethan, the more she found herself questioning everything. His cold demeanor was starting to lose its grip, but the walls he'd built around himself were still strong. And every time she thought they might break through, something seemed to push them apart. It was a late afternoon when Emily found herself in Ethan's office, waiting for him to finish a call. She had arrived early, as usual, wanting to go over some of the logistics for their upcoming trip to Abuja. The door to his office was cracked open, and she heard his voice echoing through the phone. Tell me what I need to do to fix this, Ethan said, his tone sharp, unlike the one he'd used with her in private. I'm not interested in excuses. Emily paused, her curiosity piqued. She wasn't used to hearing him like this. Cold. Commanding. But something was different now. Something unsettled her. She stepped closer to the door, trying to keep out of sight. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the conversation that followed made her heart skip a beat. That information was supposed to be confidential, and you know that, Ethan continued. I don't care how much pressure they're putting on you, but you don't leak private details about our clients. Do I make myself clear? A silence followed, then Ethan spoke again, quieter this time, almost to himself. I'm done being in the shadows because of this mistake. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. Ethan wasn't just talking about a business issue. She could tell. Whatever this mistake was, it had affected him in ways he was not willing to reveal. Her mind raced with possibilities, but before she could process her thoughts further, the office door swung open, and Ethan walked out, spotting her by the hallway. Emily, he said, his voice returning to its usual calm but firm tone. You're here early. Emily hesitated, guilt sweeping over her. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just, she trailed off, unsure of how to continue. She couldn't tell him she'd overheard that conversation. It wasn't her place. Ethan gave her a brief nod. It's fine. You can come in. As Emily followed him into the sleek, modern office, she tried to push the thoughts from her mind. She couldn't focus on his secrets, not when there were bigger things at play. We need to discuss the Abuja trip, she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. The press will be there, and the engagement needs to be a part of the story. Ethan nodded, but there was a distracted look in his eyes. He didn't seem to be focused on the logistics, not in the way he usually was. Emily took a deep breath, then decided to ask the question that had been gnawing at her all day. Ethan. What happened to you? What's really going on? He didn't respond at first. His fingers drummed lightly on the edge of his desk, and he stared at the skyline outside his office window, avoiding her gaze. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. There are things in my past, Emily, that I wish I could forget. The words hung heavy in the air between them. I know I'm not the man you thought I was, he continued, his voice tinged with something that almost resembled vulnerability. You're not the first to wonder why I keep so much hidden. But I'm not ready to share everything. Not yet. Emily felt her heart soften at his words, but she also felt frustrated. She had walked into this pretending to be part of his world, but now she was standing on the edge of it, unsure of what was real. "I never asked for your whole life story," Emily said, trying to lighten the mood, though her voice betrayed her inner turmoil. "But we can't keep pretending like everything's fine." "You're pretending, Ethan. And so am I." Ethan turned to face her then, his eyes searching hers, almost pleading for understanding. "I don't want you to get hurt," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's the last thing I want." His words hung in the air like a weight, and for a moment, Emily was struck by the complexity of the man standing before her. He wasn't just the cold, calculating billionaire anymore. There was more beneath the surface, a pain, a regret that had built walls around him. That evening, after dinner, Emily received a call that would change everything. It was a private investigator hired by her aunt, someone who had been looking into Ethan's past. The name he dropped stunned her: Rachel Carter, Ethan's estranged sister. She was involved in a scandal years ago, one that had nearly ruined the Carter family. The details were murky, but the pieces fit. Ethan's cold exterior, his avoidance of personal matters, his inability to commit to any relationship. All of it had roots in a family crisis he had never fully addressed. The investigator's words echoed in Emily's mind: "If you really want to know who Ethan Carter is, you need to talk to his sister. The truth is buried there." The morning after the phone call, Emily couldn't shake the weight of the words the private investigator had given her. Rachel Carter. Ethan's estranged sister, and the source of the scandal that had shadowed his family for years. The details had been vague, but the investigator's warning was clear: Ethan's past was much darker than anyone knew. Emily stood at the window of her apartment, the cool morning breeze from the Lagos skyline carrying with it a sense of impending change. She couldn't pretend anymore. If she was going to understand Ethan, and possibly find the answers she needed for herself, she had to confront him. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. The message was from Ethan. "Meet me at my office. We need to talk." She stared at the text, the words stirring a sense of foreboding. She knew this conversation was coming. But was she ready to hear what Ethan had been hiding? Ethan's office had always been a place of cold efficiency, but today, the air felt heavier, as though something was about to shift. He was sitting behind his massive desk, the usual distance between them already palpable. "Come in, Emily," he said, his voice neutral. Emily took a deep breath and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She felt the familiar tension rising in her chest, but this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't just playing a part in his life. This time, she needed answers. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady but firm, "I know about Rachel. I know what happened with your family." His eyes darkened, and for the first time in their interaction, she saw a crack in his composed facade. "Who told you?" he asked, his voice low. "Ow." "The private investigator," Emily replied. "I was trying to understand you, and it led me to her. I need to know the truth. What happened between you and your sister?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers running through his hair in frustration. "It's complicated. And it's not something I'm proud of." Emily stepped closer to him, her heart pounding. "I'm not here to judge you, Ethan. But I can't keep pretending we're just two people playing a role. This is real. You're real. And if we're going to continue this, whatever this is, I need to understand." He stood up suddenly, the movement sharp and decisive. "Fine. You want the truth?" Emily nodded, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan took a step toward her, his eyes no longer hiding the pain that had been buried beneath his cold exterior. "Rachel and I were close once. She was my sister, the one person I thought I could trust," he began, his voice raw. "But that all changed when our father's business went under. Rachel. She made some decisions that tore our family apart. The scandal that followed nearly destroyed everything my father had built. Emily stayed silent, absorbing every word. What kind of decisions? She got involved with people she shouldn't have, Ethan continued, his fists clenching. People who took advantage of her. And when the financial collapse happened, her actions were blamed. It was easier for everyone to pin the whole thing on her, and I couldn't stop it. I cut ties with her to protect the company, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Emily could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt, the regret, the helplessness. So, you just left her. You walked away from your sister. Ethan shook his head, his jaw tightening. I didn't want to. But I had no choice. My father, he was losing everything. And I was trying to hold it all together. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting my family, my future. And what about Rachel? Emily asked softly. What happened to her? She disappeared after that, Ethan replied, his voice strained. I've been trying to find her for years. But it's like she vanished. Emily's heart ached for him. She could see the pain of that loss, the weight of the decisions that still haunted him. You never told anyone? She asked, her voice gentle. No one, he said, his gaze dropping to the floor. I've never spoken about this. Not to anyone. Not even to you. Letting his words sink in. The man in front of her wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she had first encountered. He was someone who had been deeply hurt, someone who had made sacrifices that tore his world apart. But there was still a part of him that had never healed. I'm sorry, Ethan, Emily said quietly, her voice filled with empathy. I had no idea. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes now soft, though still burdened by the weight of his past. You couldn't have. Emily had never felt more conflicted. The discovery of Rachel Carter's existence had thrown her into a whirlwind of questions and uncertainty. The more she learned about Ethan's past, the more she realized how little she truly understood him. But this wasn't just about uncovering Ethan's past anymore. It was about their future, if they even had one. She had to find Rachel. There were too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. If Ethan wouldn't share more, Emily knew she had to take matters into her own hands. After hours of researching online, calling connections, and even visiting old friends of the Carters in Lagos, she finally found a lead. Rachel was living in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Lagos. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her hope. The next day, Emily stood outside the building where Rachel had been spotted. Her heart raced as she pressed the buzzer for the apartment. She had no idea what to expect. No idea what kind of person Rachel Carter had become. But she knew one thing for sure, this conversation would change everything. Rachel opened the door after a few moments, her eyes wary but curious. She looked nothing like Ethan, there were no sharp features or businesslike composure. Instead, Rachel had a more relaxed, almost bohemian air about her. Can I help you? She asked, her voice cautious. Are you Rachel Carter? Emily asked, her tone gentle but firm. Rachel's expression shifted slightly, but she nodded. I am. Who are you? I'm Emily Parker, she said, swallowing the lump in her throat. I'm Ethan's fiancée. The words felt heavy, as if they carried a weight much bigger than the role she was playing. Rachel's face softened for a moment, but there was a flicker of something hard, behind her eyes. What does Ethan have to do with this? What do you want? I need to know what happened, Emily said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. I need to understand why he's so closed off, why he keeps running from his past. I need to know what happened to you. Rachel's gaze flickered to the side as she took a deep breath. Then, without a word, she stepped aside, opening the door fully. Come in. Inside Rachel's modest apartment, the air was thick with memories, both old and new. The furniture was sparse, but there were photographs of her and Ethan scattered across the walls, ones that clearly hadn't been touched in years. They sat down on the worn couch, and Rachel finally spoke, her voice laced with bitterness. "It's not a story Ethan wants anyone to know. But you're here, so I might as well tell you." Emily listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ethan and I were inseparable when we were younger," Rachel began. "He was my protector, my rock. But when our father's company went under, everything changed. I was caught up in a bad crowd, trying to escape the pressure. Ethan, he didn't get it. He blamed me for everything that went wrong. When I made a huge mistake, when I became the scapegoat for the downfall of our family, he chose the company over me." Emily's heart sank as Rachel's eyes welled up with tears. "He cut me off. No explanation, no attempt to understand. He just left me. And he's been running from the truth ever since." Rachel's words hit Emily like a freight train. She knew Ethan had been through something painful, but hearing it from his sister, it was raw. It was real. As the conversation continued, Emily learned more about the depths of the rift between Ethan and his family. The betrayal was deeper than she could have imagined, and the guilt Ethan carried was suffocating him. But as Rachel spoke, something else became clear: Ethan hadn't just distanced himself from her. He had distanced himself from everyone. His entire life was built on the lie of perfection, his business empire, his public image, his control over everything and everyone. Emily realized that Ethan's coldness was a defense mechanism, a way of protecting himself from the hurt he never allowed himself to face. In Ethan's office later that evening, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the city. "You found her," he said without turning around. Emily hesitated. She had expected a confrontation, but his calmness threw her off guard. "I found her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She told me everything, Ethan. About the family, about the betrayal, and about you." Ethan's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn to face her. "You shouldn't have gone to her." Emily stepped closer, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "I needed to understand. I needed to know why you've been hiding from everyone, including yourself." He spun around to face her, his eyes dark with frustration. "I told you before, Emily. You don't get to know everything. This is none of your business." "Yes, it is," Emily shouted, her voice breaking. "You think I'm just here to play a part in your life, to pretend? I'm not pretending anymore, Ethan. This isn't just a game to me. I care about you." There was a long silence. Then, Ethan took a step forward, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "I never wanted you to get hurt," he said quietly. "I never wanted you to see the mess I made." "I already see it," Emily replied, her voice shaking with emotion. "But I'm not running away. Not from you. Not from this. You don't have to do this alone anymore." The day after Emily's confrontation with Ethan, the atmosphere between them was tense. Every word felt like a challenge, and every silence seemed to stretch between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ethan had always been a man of control, but that control was slipping away. The walls he had built around his emotions were crumbling, and he hated it. But more than that, he hated how much he had come to rely on Emily. Her presence, her understanding, her ability to get under his skin in ways no one else had. It was a cold morning in Lagos when Ethan received the call. His father's old business partner, a man named Kenneth Alaba, had just called to inform him that the ongoing negotiations for a new real estate project were in jeopardy. Alaba had been the key player in the past, and Ethan had always kept a tight relationship with him. But the news hit Ethan hard. It was a reminder of how much his past still had a hold on him. He needed to talk to someone. But he couldn't just talk to anyone. He couldn't talk to his employees. He couldn't talk to his father. And he couldn't talk to Rachel, she was long gone. And Emily, well, he wasn't sure if he should let her in any further. Every time he did, it seemed like he was losing more of himself. She was becoming too important, and that terrified him. Meanwhile, Emily was grappling with her own demons. The deeper she dug into Ethan's past, the more she realized that their engagement was far more complicated than she had first imagined. It wasn't just about gaining back her scholarship or finding closure for herself. She was starting to care about him, and the more she cared, the more she feared what the future held. She knew Ethan was hiding. It was a cold morning in Lagos when Ethan received the call. Hi, and part of her wanted to help him heal. But every time she tried to get closer, he pulled away. His walls were high, and no matter how much she tried to break through, he kept retreating into his cold, distant world. But there was one thing she knew for sure: if this relationship was going to work, if it was going to be real, it couldn't just be about appearances. She couldn't keep pretending to be his fiancée in front of the press while they both carried the weight of their individual pasts. The pressure of public life. The pressure was mounting as their engagement became a topic of constant media scrutiny. The public wanted answers, and their relationship was under the microscope. Every time they stepped out together, every smile, every glance was dissected. The paparazzi had taken a particular interest in Emily, and soon rumors began to swirl about her intentions. Was she truly in love with Ethan, or was she using him for her own gain? At the same time, Samantha, Ethan's ex, seemed to be everywhere, making cryptic comments to the media, casting doubt on the legitimacy of their engagement. It was clear she was trying to make Ethan doubt Emily, to pull him back into her world. Ethan had warned Emily about Samantha. He'd told her that Samantha was dangerous, that she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. But Emily couldn't help but feel like the real enemy wasn't just Samantha, it was the way Ethan was distancing himself from her. She had to know where they stood, or they would both be caught in this endless cycle of confusion and mistrust. It happened that evening, after a long day of business meetings and a press event that left both of them exhausted. Emily was sitting in the living room of Ethan's penthouse when he finally walked in, his face a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," Emily said, her voice quiet but firm. She had had enough. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, couldn't keep pretending that she wasn't suffocating in this false engagement. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just your fiancé for the cameras, Ethan," she said, standing up. "I don't want to be a part of some deal anymore. I want something real. I want to know if we are real. But I can't do that if you keep pushing me away." Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew this moment was coming. He had always known. But it didn't make it any easier. "Emily," he started, but his voice faltered, and for the first time in days, he looked vulnerable. "I never wanted you to get hurt. I never wanted any of this. But now it feels like everything is falling apart. I've always kept everyone at arm's length because I couldn't afford to be weak. But now," he looked down, his voice quiet. "Now it's you. And I don't know how to keep you at arm's length anymore." Emily's heart softened. She had always seen the cold exterior, but now she saw the man behind it. The man who had been carrying the weight of his past for so long that he had forgotten how to let anyone in. "You don't have to do this alone, Ethan," she said softly, taking a step closer. "I'm not going anywhere. But if you want this, if you want us, you need to stop running. Stop hiding behind this act." For the first time in a long time, Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the care she had for him, despite everything. And in that moment, something shifted between them. The days following their emotional confrontation in the penthouse were tense, but something had shifted between Ethan and Emily. They were no longer just pretending to be a couple for the press, nor were they playing their parts in some grand charade. They had acknowledged their emotions, their shared vulnerability, and the deep connection that had begun to form. But even as they took small steps toward each other, the weight of their pasts, particularly Ethan's, still loomed over them. Ethan had been distant after their conversation, retreating to his work as if the only thing that could distract him from his feelings was the hustle of the business world. But Emily could sense the cracks in his armor. She had never seen him this lost, this unsure. And she couldn't help but wonder if the man who had held himself back from everyone, including her, was finally ready to let someone in. The day after their confrontation, Ethan received a call that would change everything. Rachel Carter, the sister he had cut ties with so long ago, had finally reached out. Emily had insisted on being there when Ethan met her, knowing that this reunion might be the key to healing old wounds. Ethan hadn't wanted to involve her. He had made it clear that he didn't want her to see the full extent of the scars his family had left on him. But Emily wasn't just playing the role of a fiancée anymore. She was his partner, whether he liked it or not. The meeting was arranged in a quiet cafe in Lagos. Ethan looked tense as he waited, his jaw clenched as if preparing himself for the confrontation that was about to take place. Emily sat beside him, her presence a reminder that they were facing this moment together. When Rachel finally walked in, Emily couldn't help but notice how much she looked like Ethan. They had the same sharp features, the same dark eyes, but where Ethan's face was hardened by years of control and regret, Rachel's was soft, as though she had allowed herself to grieve the past and move on. Rachel glanced at Ethan, then at Emily, before taking a seat. There was an awkward silence before Rachel spoke. "You came," she said to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure if you would." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't sure either." Emily could feel the tension in the air between the two siblings. It was like watching two people who had once been close but had spent years building walls to keep each other out. "Why did you reach out?" Ethan asked, his voice stiff. "You know it's been a long time. You've been gone for years." "I know," Rachel replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "I didn't want to come back into your life like this. But I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I made mistakes, Ethan. I know that. But I never stopped thinking about you." Ethan didn't say anything for a moment. His expression softened, and Emily saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. He wasn't sure how to respond. But Emily could feel the shift. It was the first time in years that Ethan had been willing to listen to Rachel, to open the door to reconciliation. As the conversation continued, Emily watched the way Ethan interacted with his sister. There was no anger in his voice, no bitterness, just a deep, unresolved pain. But despite everything, he was trying. He was trying to mend what had been broken. But then Rachel dropped the bombshell. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, Ethan," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "But I am asking you to forgive yourself. You've carried this guilt for years, and it's eating you alive. It's not just about what happened to our family. It's about what you've done to yourself. You've shut everyone out, even me." Ethan's face paled. His hand clenched into a fist as he tried to control his emotions. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, his voice raw. "You don't have to fix it alone," Emily said softly, her hand gently resting on his. "We can work through this together. You don't have to carry it all on your own." Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing at the precipice of something new. But then the door to the cafe opened, and a familiar face walked in. Samantha. She had been quiet for days, allowing Ethan and Emily some space. But now, her presence sent a chill through the room. She walked over to their table, her eyes narrowed as she took in the situation. Ethan's expression immediately hardened. "Are we having a family reunion now?" Samantha asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. Emily could feel the tension rising again. She knew that Samantha's arrival would only complicate things, but she wasn't ready to let her tear down everything they had just started to rebuild. "Samantha," Ethan said coldly. "This isn't the time. I think it's exactly the time, Samantha replied, her eyes shifting to Emily. You've made your choice, Ethan. But don't think for a second that I'm going to just sit back and watch you throw everything away for her. Ethan stood up, his fists clenched. I've told you before, Samantha. This is not your decision. It's mine. Is it? Samantha shot back. Because it sure doesn't look like it. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.